Will you all please join in the chalice lighting words found in the order of service? We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, and the celebration of the life we share together. You know, as a kid, and this is probably still true now, my favorite Olympic sport to watch was figure skating. Is that true of anybody? I see some nods. I think most people must just, it's the favorite one. But I didn't have any connection to figure skating. The only place that you could ice skate where I grew up was this dingy, old, run-down indoor rink, and I was terrible at it. Yet every Winter Olympics, my eyes were glued to the screen and my body was filled with that soaring, that lifting, that majesty, that joy, that experience just beyond words, that grace. And at the same time that it seemed so imminent, so real in my body, as I'm sure my mirror neurons were firing and giving me that experience, if I were soaring across the ice, I was also aware of that painful distancing. This grace was for those perfect, graceful bodies on the screen. Not for my clumsy, awkward, always falls on my face when I ice skate body. Like so many of us do, I was learning to internalize that old Calvinist story about grace. It's a tired old story, but it's so deeply embedded in our culture that it affects us more than I think we realize. You know this story. It's that Puritan story, the story of our religious ancestors, and the story that our religious ancestors rejected as they splintered off into Unitarians and Universalists. You know it, but it's worth a quick recap. It goes something like this. Calvin on grace. God is totally in charge of everything, therefore God is in control of all of the grace in the world. There's a finite amount that God basically allotted at the beginning of time, choosing some people to get it, the elect, and some people who wouldn't, the reprobate. The elect would be drawn inexorably towards God, caught up by this irresistible grace, while the reprobate would basically be damned no matter what they did. And in many ways, this seed from those early Puritans who invaded and colonized so long ago is still the theology of our land. It is a theology that justified slavery and genocide, continues to underlie our vast inequality, widespread oppression. It's the theology that creates a culture of celebrity, where we should idolize the lives of the rich and famous who appear to be so full of grace. It's a theology that undermines our agency and emphasizes our helplessness. And of course, we have a long heritage and resources of countering that theology. And one of those moments, one of those resources came about in the early 1900s. It was called process theology. It sprang up in a bunch of religious groups. And it makes the claim that rather than God being in control, as Calvin had it, with all the power in God's hands, God is instead a verb, a force, a movement that's tugging on us and everything. God is a power, but not the only power. We have power too. We are co-creators with this divine energy, shaping the universe as it unfolds. Charles Hartshorne was one of the early thinkers about this school of theology, and he was a Unitarian, and he was also an avid bird watcher. And he was once asked, he has this impressive bibliography, like spiritual, philosophical, theological books, and he was asked, of all your books, what's your favorite? What's your one great book? And he said, my one great book is the one I wrote about bird songs. And he created really an incredible theology out of his study of birds. He noticed that while most of the time bird song is utilitarian, it's there, I'm hungry, or there's a threat, there's a reason for it. Sometimes some birds sing just for the enjoyment of it. Just because it's pleasureful, or just because it sounds good, or feels good, or is fun, or something frivolous like that. And Hartshorne draw from that idea that there is no limit to the amount of beauty that can be created. That all beings are capable of bringing more beauty, more grace into the world, and there's no limit to how much can be made. All beings are capable of bringing more beauty, more grace into the world, and there's no limit to how much can be made. I don't think I really understood this for myself until I stumbled into a dance studio in downtown Oakland, where a small, disparate community gathers at irregular times to practice a bizarre community art form called interplay. Phil Porter and Cynthia Winton Henry are the creators of interplay, and they're a couple of the most interesting characters I've ever met. Cynthia was once a Disciples of Christ minister, but renounced her ordination. And given the opportunity, she proudly and loudly proclaims that her spirit animal is a turkey. Phil is a fastidious gay man from Indiana who doesn't hesitate to shout out, "Go Hoosiers!" at mention of his home state. They met in a dance company, and recognizing each other as fellow dancer theologians, they embarked on a 30-year collaboration that ended up with interplay. So what is interplay? Have you ever tried to describe Unitarian Universalism? It's kind of like that. I began practicing it by dropping in on these Tuesday evening classes. Each week we'd play with these simple forms of improvisational movement and storytelling and singing. I had a background in theater, so the storytelling was great. I loved singing, although I wasn't, I never considered myself adept at it. That was still, just fun to do in these simple ways. But when it came to the movement, I was always a bit uncertain. Was I really allowed to have grace in my body? That image again of the ice skaters dancing across the ice in the Olympics. Wasn't grace really just for them? Through incremental baby steps like dancing a one-hand dance, I found my clumsy and awkward body flying with grace and ease across the floor. At the end of one class, the teacher, who was a real dancer, with her own company and everything, she commented on the way I had my pant leg rolled up on one side. I think it was probably because I was going out to ride my bike. But she said, that's very in vogue among modern dancers. And I said, oh, so you're saying I can call myself a dancer? And she said, Marcus, you are absolutely a dancer. Her solemn care and that twinkle in her eye made that moment stick. All beings are capable of bringing more beauty, more grace into the world, and there is no limit to how much can be made. So I want to share with you a couple interplay bits and pieces. Will you raise your hand if you have ever had the experience of stress? I thought that might be the case, yeah. What does it feel like? Like in your body, what's the experience of stress? Just call it out. How does stress feel? Tight.
Fast heart rate.
Tense, fast heart rate, yeah.
Exhausting, nauseating.
Exhausting, nauseating, yes, it can get there. Yeah, so imagine we could go on with that list for a while, but imagine we gather that list over here. We all know that experience, stress. Now, let's just for a moment create a list over here that would be the opposite of those experiences. What's the opposite of that experience in your body? What does that feel like? Call it out.
Light.
Light, relaxed, fluid-free, calm, peaceful, asleep, well-rested. Yeah. So if we imagine that list, those qualities, those experiences, and just for now, title that list Grace. That's grace. That's the physicality of grace. And does everyone recognize that experience as well? You know that experience. You're familiar with it. When have you had that experience? What are the moments? And you can just kind of think about these. What places? What are you doing? Who are you with? What creates those experiences of grace? For me, the world-changing idea that comes next is if we are familiar with this experience of grace, and we know the things that create that experience, we can choose to have more grace in our lives. And a lot of times when people talk about grace, they're talking about big deal grace, the kind of grace that's overwhelming, but I think there's also little deal grace. The kind of grace that's as simple as taking a deep breath. Will you just take a deep breath with me? Make any more grace? Might make you cough too, but try it one more time, and this time let it out with a big sigh, loud sigh. Now we're getting those grace generators going. And I think the other amazing thing that we notice when we start focusing on these experiences of stress and grace in the body is that stress and grace can be communicated directly body to body. Have you noticed that? Would you rather be around someone who's experiencing stress or someone who's experiencing grace? And you too are a transmitter of stress or grace. At the church I served in Berkeley, we had a simple Vespers service on Thursday nights. It was a small crowd each week, and almost every week Zoe was there. I don't know the details, but Zoe had some cerebral palsy that caused her limbs to move in sharp, jagged ways. Her hands were almost always clutched together like this. Yet, Zoe was one of those people I knew I could count on for a quick grace transfusion whenever I needed it. And anytime there was music in our service, whether it was the improvisation on the piano or the whole group singing out a hymn, Zoe would begin doing a one-hand dance. Through the simple play of her hand, she expressed the depth and breadth of her spirit. And another learning from interplay truly came to life for me as I watched her move. Within any physical limitation, there are still an infinite number of possibilities for movement and expression. Within any limitation, there are still an infinite number of possibilities. So I wanted to invite you now to try a one-hand dance. So if you're willing, just move your hand around a little bit. And try moving it in a smooth way. We're just going to get warmed up a little. Great, thank you, Bill. And now move your hand in a jerky kind of a way. See if you can do quick and smooth. And see if you can do slow and jerky. If more than your hand gets involved, that's okay. And if you bump into your neighbor, you just say thank you. Now see it moving far away from your body. See how your reach is right now, however far you want to go. And now bring it in nice and close to your body. You can even make contact if you want. And make a shape. And just hold it still for a moment. And make another shape. And one more shape. Take a deep breath and let it out with a sigh. All right, that was just the warm-up. Now I'm going to invite you to do a one-hand dance. Bill's going to play about a minute of music. And if you're more comfortable closing your eyes, please enjoy that. If you want to just be still and witness, that's just as good. And if you'd like, call to mind someone who makes grace in your life. Someone who's a grace maker for you, and make this a dance on behalf of that person. A one-hand dance. Take one more deep breath and let it out with a sigh. And just enjoy whatever bit of grace you've just made. Lest we go into black and white thinking, I want to go back to that stress and grace for a moment. Stress is actually an important part of our experience, of course. That physiological stress response lets us know when we're in danger and what we need to, and that we need to do something. But unfortunately, it's gotten a bit out of whack in our modern world. You know, it's good to feel stress when there's a bear. Ah, there's a bear! I need to run away or make myself big. I can never remember which one. I hope if I'm ever with a bear, I'll remember the right one. But every time a car drives by, we don't need to feel like, ah, it's a bear! Or when there's a siren or whatever it is that makes our bodies have that same stress response that was designed to get us out of danger with the bear. And so because of that, many of us are living with chronic stress. And we're stressed not just because of the sounds of the cars, but because of what the cars are doing to our planet. We're stressed about rising sea levels, about islands of plastic trash floating out in the ocean. We stress about escalating inequality and racism and harsh immigration laws and so much more. There's a lot to stress about. And that's without even mentioning the stresses, the pains, the worries of our personal lives. For many of us, this stress leads us to activism. We're in such pain over the state of the world, we just feel like we have to do something about it. But the truth is, when we do the work of healing the world because we're stressed about the state of things, it's not bringing about the justice, the grace that we long for. Too often, instead, it leads to tense meetings and harsh emails. I don't know if any of you have experience with any of that. To burnout and despair. The Trappist monk Thomas Merton writes this about it. There is a pervasive form of contemporary violence to which the idealist most easily succumbs: activism and overwork. The rush and pressure of modern life are a form, perhaps the most common form, of its innate violence. To allow oneself to be carried away by a multitude of conflicting concerns, to surrender to too many demands, to commit oneself to too many projects, to want to help everyone in everything, is to succumb to violence. The frenzy of our activism neutralizes our work for peace. It destroys our own inner capacity for peace. It destroys the fruitfulness of our work, because it kills the root of inner wisdom, which makes work fruitful. Perhaps it was Thomas Merton's monastery where this last story took place. If you've heard this story, forgive me, but like any good parable, it bears repeating. There was once a monastery that was run down. It had once been a vibrant center of the community, but now there were just 5 monks remaining there, the abbot and 4 brothers. It looked as if it was going to be abandoned soon as they died off. One day the abbot got it in mind to go visit the rabbi who had a hermitage nearby and ask if he had any advice for how to save their dying monastery. So he went to visit the rabbi, asked, "Do you have any advice, Rabbi? I know you've been studying religion, community for so long. In all your wisdom, what would you share with us?" And the rabbi said, "I'm sorry, I don't have any advice. I can't help you. But I will tell you this. I had a dream last night that you were coming. And in my dream, an angel visited me and told me that one of the monks in your monastery is the Messiah." The abbot's eyes widened. He nodded and left the rabbi and went back to the monastery and shared it with the other monks there. The rabbi unfortunately had no good advice for us, but he did tell me something. He said that one of us is the Messiah. So in the days and weeks and months that followed, they began to ponder this and wonder whether there was any possible significance to that rabbi's story. The rabbi is one of us? The Messiah is one of us? Which one? Oh, it must be the abbot. He's been in charge here the longest. Although Brother Thomas is a very holy man. Everyone knows that Brother Thomas is a man of light, but certainly not Brother Elred. He's so crabby and crotchety. He's one of those stress transmitters. But come to think about it, Brother Elred is always right. Maybe he is the Messiah. And this went on, as you can imagine. Yet these questions caused them to begin to treat one another with a little bit more grace. They began to treat one another as if they each could have been the Messiah. Soon that glow began to surround the community, the glow of a community that treats one another with a sacred care. And as people began to visit the monastery, because it was in the beautiful woods and people would go there for picnics and so on, they would notice how wonderful the feeling was there. They would be attracted to stay, learn from the monks who lived there, and the monastery did once again become a vibrant center of light and spirituality. in their realm. That monastery became a center, a community of resistance and resilience, a beloved community, a community of grace. May our community be such a community. May we remember that grace is not limited to the elect or to Olympic figure skaters, that we can bring more of it into our lives and into the lives of others, and there is no limit to how much can be made. May we be generators and transmitters of grace for each other and for a universe that calls to us, beckoning that we join our lives to the great dance and use our great powers to bless the world with more and more beauty. May it be so. Amen. Jorge, would you like to come forward and extinguish the chalice? Thanks. So you just use that to cover it up. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we hold in our hearts until we are together again.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.